Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are immersing ourselves in a case that, well, it really shook Australia and changed a lot about how people think about child safety. We're talking about the disappearance and murder of 13-year-old Daniel James Morcombe.
It's a deeply tragic story, of course, but from an investigative standpoint, it's also a real case study. Persistence, forensic science, how police handle these incredibly difficult cold cases. Daniel vanished from the Sunshine Coast in Queensland back in December 2003.
Yeah, and the thing that always gets me, looking back, is just how long it took. 8 years. 8 agonizing years before they finally charged the perpetrator.
8 years. It's an almost unimaginable wait for a family, for a community.
Absolutely. So our mission for you today is to really go beyond those headlines, beyond the immediate emotion, though it's obviously huge.
Yeah.
We want to dissect the specifics, like the almost cruel chain of little things, coincidences really, that led to the abduction itself. And then the sheer scale of the investigation that followed it genuinely redefined cold case work in Australia. And maybe most importantly, the incredible lasting legacy that Daniel's parents created out of all this.
Definitely. So just to ground everyone, let's lay out the key facts. The victim, Daniel James Morcombe. He was abducted on December 7, 2003, just 13 years old.
13.
The location was along Nambour Connection Road in Woombe, up on the Sunshine Coast. And the person eventually convicted was Brett Peter Cowan. He was found guilty on all charges: murder, indecent treatment of a child under 16, and interfering with a corpse.
Okay, that 8-year gap between Daniel vanishing and Cowan's conviction really sets the stage for this deep dive, doesn't it? We have to start right at the beginning with that incredibly small window of time when Daniel disappeared and figure out how such a massive years-long investigation grew from that one brief, awful moment. Right, so let's go back to that Sunday, December 7th, 2003. The details are just, well, they read like a script for disaster almost. A series of small failures lining up. Daniel's plans were so ordinary, just the 13-year-old kid heading into the Christmas holiday.
Exactly. He wanted to get a haircut, maybe do some Christmas shopping at the Sunshine Plaza Shopping Center. Totally normal stuff.
So he was planning to catch the bus?
Yeah, the 1:35 p.m. bus. He was waiting at a specific spot under the Keel Mountain Road overpass there in Woombe. It's quite a busy road generally, but the actual spot where he was waiting, it's a bit isolated.
Yes.
2 kilometers north of the Big Pineapple, if you know the area.
Okay. And this is where things start to go wrong, isn't it, with the bus itself?
Right. The first domino falls. That 1:35 p.m. bus he was waiting for, it had broken down.
Ah.
So eventually a replacement bus comes along, but the driver of that bus is already running way behind schedule because of the breakdown.
Okay, so he's trying to make up time.
He is. And that leads to the next critical failure. The driver sees Daniel waiting, but decides not to stop. 2 reasons, really. First, the spot under the overpass wasn't an official scheduled bus stop.
Right. It was just a place people sometimes waited.
Exactly. And second, the driver was rushing, trying to stick to the timetable as much as possible after the delay. And this becomes incredibly important later, the driver didn't just ignore him.
What did he do?
He actually radioed the bus depot immediately. He reported seeing the boy waiting alone under the overpass and specifically requested that they send another bus, a third bus, to come and pick Daniel up.
Wow. So in a way, the bus system failed him by not stopping, but also confirmed his exact location and the fact he was alone right before he was taken.
It's precisely that, a tragic irony. The system both abandoned him and pinpointed his vulnerability. So, we know Daniel was last seen by witnesses around 2:10 p.m., still under that overpass.
And were there other people around?
Yes. Crucially, witnesses reported seeing him there, but also seeing 2 men near him around that same time. 2:2 p.m.
2 men. Okay. And the window of opportunity here, it was terrifyingly small, wasn't it?
Unbelievably small. Remember that third bus, the second driver had called in for Daniel?
Yeah.
When that bus arrived at the unofficial stop under the overpass, estimates put the time at only about 3 minutes later, maybe 2:13 p.m.
3 minutes.
3 minutes. And in that tiny gap, Daniel and the 2 man witnesses had seen nearby, they were gone.
Just gone.
Vanished. And think about what that means for an investigation. It's devastating. It tells the police immediately that the abduction was incredibly quick, opportunistic, probably little or no struggle. And it means there were essentially no witnesses to the actual abduction, only people who saw him before, potentially with persons of interest nearby moments earlier.
So tying it all together, it really was this awful cascade of small things. The broken bus, the unofficial stop, the driver trying to make up time. Each little event just created the space, the vulnerability for this to happen.
It's that cruel confluence of events,
Right.
absolutely. And the investigation starts on the back foot immediately because the crime scene itself is so transient. No struggle, no obvious clues left behind. The only real leads initially were he was waiting for a bus and there were maybe two men nearby. But even those descriptions would have been chaotic in the initial shock.
Yeah. That speed, that lack of a concrete scene, investigators were chasing shadows right from the very start. Okay, so given he vanished so quickly with so little initial forensic evidence, the investigation that followed had to be just enormous, didn't it? Just to try and generate any solid leads.
Oh, absolutely enormous. Our sources are clear.
Yeah.
The search for Daniel Morcombe rapidly became one of the most extensive, most resource-intensive investigations in Queensland's history, maybe even Australia's.
And the public reaction was immediate, right?
Instant and massive. You could feel the collective anxiety, the deep sympathy for the Morcombe family. And that public feeling very quickly translated into, well, significant financial incentives to try and break the case open.
Okay, let's unpack the money side of it because it was pretty extraordinary. The Queensland government put up a reward, which is fairly standard, but still substantial, $250,000.
Right. But what really showed the depth of public feeling, the community desperation, was the private reward. People donated, pooled money, and it reached an incredible $750,000.
So combined, that's $1 million on the table.
$1 million. That kept the case in the public eye constantly. It ensured nobody forgot Daniel. It was a clear signal, find this boy, find who did this.
But public involvement wasn't just about money, was it? There's that really unusual step with the clay model.
Yeah, that was a striking tactic. In May 2009, so years into the search, investigators tried something physical, something visual. They commissioned a full-size clay model of one of the men witnesses described seeing near Daniel.
And they put it right there at the abduction site.
Right under the overpass on Namber Connection Road. It was a powerful, almost haunting image. Part police work, part public art installation, like you said earlier.
Did it work? Did it jog memories?
It seemed to. The sources say that within just a few days of that model going up, police got a sudden surge. Over 300 new tips came in.
Wow.
Now, realistically, most of those tips probably didn't lead anywhere directly. But that volume of information is still valuable. It gives police new names to check, new angles to pursue, allows them to re-interview people, maybe trigger a memory someone didn't realize they had. It reignited the information flow when things might have been going cold.
But these high-profile cases, they always attract a media storm, don't they? And sometimes that attention isn't helpful or it focuses on the wrong things.
Exactly. And that's where things got complicated, particularly around privacy and potential prejudice. As the years went by, especially around 2009 when that private reward expired, media attention really started to zero in on certain individuals.
Like Douglas Jackway.
Precisely. Douglas Jackway was a known pedophile. And the timing was unfortunate, to say the least. He'd been released from prison only about a month before Daniel disappeared.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So naturally, his history, combined with the timing of his release near the location, he immediately became a major person of interest in the public mind and therefore in the media spotlight.
And that put pressure on the authorities, I imagine.
Immense pressure. The Queensland government faced a lot of criticism over Jackway's release. There were claims, particularly from an independent MP at the time, that the Supreme Court had supposedly ignored warnings about his high risk of reoffending. It became very political very quickly.
Which then leads to questions about how the media handles these situations, right?
Absolutely. The intense media focus on Jackway, which many felt amounted to trial by media before any charges were laid, prompted civil liberties groups to step in. They started calling for new laws.
Laws to do what?
Essentially, to ban media outlets from naming people who were linked to criminal cases, even as persons of interest, before they were formally charged. They argued it was about protecting due process, preventing reputational damage based on speculation. It's a complex balance, isn't it? The public's right to know versus an individual's right to privacy and a fair investigation.
Yeah, definitely. So the police are juggling this massive investigation, the reward money, the tips from the clay model, political heat, media scrutiny, and this influx of leads, many of which must have been, just noise or distractions.
Total chaos,
Yeah.
in many ways, which is partly why Daniel's parents, Bruce and Denise, pushed for a more formal process to try and consolidate everything.
The coronial inquest.
Exactly. They specifically requested it. The inquest started on October 2010 and ran through to April 2011. It's important to understand its purpose. A coronial inquest isn't a trial to find someone guilty.
Right. It's about establishing the facts.
Precisely. Establishing the known facts surrounding a death, or in this case, a disappearance, officially under oath. For the Morcombes and for the investigation, it was a crucial way to bring together 7 years of information, witness statements, leads, conflicting accounts, and put it all on the public record in a structured way.
So who testified? People who might have known something but weren't suspects themselves.
All sorts. Key witnesses included the bus driver, the second one, who failed to stop but radioed it in his testimony, locked down that crucial 2:00 p.m. timeline.
Okay.
There was a woman who testified about seeing a man acting suspiciously, just loitering near the abduction site around the right time. And yes, several specific persons of interest were called. This often included criminals who had, at some point, claimed they knew something about the murder, maybe who did it sometimes, trying to trade information for deals,
Right. Standard jailhouse rumors and maneuvering.
A lot of that. The inquest had to systematically sift through all those threads, trying to separate credible information from noise. It created a really comprehensive public account of the investigation up to that point, even though, ironically, the actual breakthrough was already developing behind the scenes through a completely different, much more covert police strategy.
So the inquest was kind of like cleaning the slate, organizing the knowns and unknowns, ruling out dead ends, solidifying the timeline and witness accounts, ready for whatever came next.
That's a good way to put it. A necessary consolidation, even if it didn't directly crack the case itself.
Okay, so despite this massive public search, the rewards, the inquest, the case essentially remained unsolved until August 2011. What changed? What was the breakthrough? It wasn't another public appeal, was it?
No, it was a complete shift in strategy. The police moved away from relying on public information and launched a highly sophisticated and frankly controversial undercover operation.
This is the Mr. Big operation we hear about.
Exactly. It's a technique, primarily developed in Canada, actually, where undercover officers create a fictional criminal organization, a gang, essentially.
Okay.
They then identify their target, in this case, Brett Peter Cowan, and work to recruit him into this fake gang. The whole idea is psychological.
How so?
You build trust, create a sense of belonging, maybe offer status or money within the organization. The target starts to feel comfortable, loyal even, to his new criminal associates. The end game is usually the Mr. Big figure, the supposed boss of the gang, demanding that the target confess to any serious past crimes as a way of, clearing the slate, proving their loyalty, ensuring there are no loose ends that could put heat on the gang.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
elaborate. A whole fake world built around the suspect.
Incredibly elaborate and resource-intensive. But it worked. The operation reached its climax on August 13th, 2011. That's the day Cowan was secretly recorded confessing and subsequently taken into custody.
Now, Cowan wasn't just some random name pulled out of a hat, was he? He'd been on the police radar before.
He had. That's what's really interesting here. He wasn't a new suspect generated by the sting itself. Police had actually interviewed him years earlier.
Back in 2006, our notes say. What was his story back then?
Back in 2006, he gave them what seemed like a plausible, if slightly convenient, alibi. He admitted he was driving along Keel Mountain Road on the day Daniel disappeared.
Okay, so he placed himself nearby.
He did, but he claimed he was only there to buy marijuana from a dealer he knew in the area. So he acknowledged being on that road around the right time, but strongly denied seeing Daniel or having anything to do with his disappearance. Police were suspicious, clearly, but they didn't have enough concrete evidence to take it further at that point.
So it took the pressure of the Mr. Big sting years later, feeling like he had to impress this fake crime boss. That's what finally got the truth out.
That appears to be the case. Under the belief that he needed to confess to secure his future with this powerful criminal group, he finally admitted it. He told the undercover officers, who he thought were his gangster bosses, that he saw Daniel waiting, pulled over, and offered him a lift to the shopping center.
Did he give details that lined up with other evidence?
Yes, crucially he did. He mentioned parking his car nearby in the car park of a church close to the overpass. That detail was consistent with the layout of the area and potentially linked to some earlier witness accounts of vehicles seen nearby. His confession provided that missing narrative, the specific actions that occurred in that horrifying 3-minute window.
And that confession wasn't just words, right? It led directly to tangible evidence.
Immediately. Based on information gleaned during the operation and the confession, police located and seized a specific vehicle, a white Mitsubishi Pajero.
A Pajero? Was that significant?
Hugely significant. It was seized from a property linked to Cowan out on Russell Island. And that vehicle type, the white Pajero, matched the description given years earlier during the inquest by a witness who reported seeing a similar white 4WD parked about 100 meters north of the abduction site around the time Daniel vanished.
Wow. So a detail from years ago suddenly clicks into place, confirming his vehicle was likely right there.
Exactly. It connected Cowan's confession, his known movements, and a previously uncorroborated witness sighting.
Okay, so the confession and the car provide the link. But the final, awful confirmation came from the search guided by Cowan himself, didn't it? He led the undercover officers to where he left Daniel's body.
He did. Based on what he told the undercover operatives, the search focused on a specific area in the Glass House Mountains. It was grim work, but it finally brought the physical search for Daniel to an end.
What did they find there?
On August 21st, 2011, just over a week after the confession, searchers made the first discoveries. They found 2 shoes. Critically, these shoes were identified as being the same brand and style, similar to the pair Daniel was known to be wearing when he disappeared.
Oh, gosh.
They also found the first 3 human bones in that initial search, along with remnants of clothing, underpants, and a belt.
And the search continued meticulously after that.
It did. Forensic teams combed the area. Over the following days and weeks, they recovered a total of 17 human bones. Fragments identified as parts of a rib, hip bone, leg bones, arm bones, and vertebrae. Enough to proceed with identification.
And the final confirmation, the absolute proof it was Daniel, came from DNA.
Yes. The definitive link was made using DNA analysis. They managed to extract a DNA profile from the recovered remains and match it to a sample obtained from Daniel's toothbrush.
His toothbrush, kept all those years by his family.
Preserved by the family, provided to police. It's a stark reminder, isn't it, of how crucial seemingly small pieces of evidence, carefully kept, can be in solving these long, cold cases. That toothbrush provided the final, irrefutable proof.
Just incredible. But there was one thing they never found, right? Something personal of Daniel's.
That's right. Despite the extensive searching of the site, one item that the Morcombes often mentioned, something distinctive Daniel had with him, was never recovered. It was a fob-style pocket watch, apparently engraved with his name, Dan.
Never found. A small, lingering mystery.
A small, sad piece of the puzzle missing.
The discovery of the remains, horrible as it was, must have brought, well, a very complex kind of closure. The funeral followed, didn't it?
It did. It was held on December 7th, 2012, exactly 9 years to the day after he disappeared. The community response was immense. More than 2,000 people attended. It was a truly national moment of mourning, but also perhaps a release after nearly a decade of uncertainty and desperate hope.
So the Mr. Big operation delivered the confession, the search delivered the remains. The next stage was the courts. Brett Peter Cowan faced trial. What were the specific charges again?
He was charged with 3 offenses: murder, indecently dealing with a child under the age of 16, which relates to the sexual aspect of the crime, and improperly dealing with a corpse for concealing Daniel's body.
Okay. And the trial itself must have been huge.
Absolutely massive. It kicked off in the Supreme Court of Queensland in February 2014. Justice Rosalind Atkinson presided. And just to give you a sense of the scale, our sources mentioned the prosecution called 116 witnesses.
116. Wow.
Yeah, and they tendered over 200 exhibits as evidence. This wasn't just about the confession. It was about painstakingly weaving together 8 years of investigation, witness sightings, the vehicle evidence, the forensic findings from the Glass House Mountains, and the controversial undercover recordings. A huge, complex jigsaw puzzle for the jury.
And Cowan's position throughout this?
He maintained his innocence, pleaded not guilty to all charges, and notably, he chose not to testify himself during the trial. He exercised his right to silence, leaving his defense team to challenge the police methods, particularly the legality and reliability of that undercover confession.
But the jury didn't buy the defense arguments.
Ultimately, no. On March 13, 2014, after deliberating, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 3 charges: murder, indecent dealing, and interfering with the corpse.
And the sentencing followed quickly.
Very quickly, the next day, March 14th, Justice Atkinson handed down the sentence. For the murder conviction, it was life imprisonment. Under Queensland law at the time, that came with a mandatory non-parole period, which she set at 20 years.
20 years before he could even apply for parole.
Correct. The sentences for the other 2 charges, 3.5 years for the indecent dealing and 2 years for interfering with the corpse, were set to run concurrently. So they didn't add extra time to that 20-year minimum.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, doesn't it? Justice Atkinson made some very strong comments during sentencing, connecting Cowan's past to her decision.
She did. It was quite pointed.
Yeah.
Especially coming from a judge. Her commentary wasn't just about the crime against Daniel. It explicitly referenced Cowan's history.
Which was?
Our sources confirm he had 2 prior convictions for child sex offenses from earlier incidents before Daniel's abduction. This established a pattern of predatory behavior.
Right.
And Justice Atkinson clearly felt this history was relevant to his prospects for rehabilitation and the risk he posed. When delivering the sentence, she made that now famous statement directly to Cowan: "I don't think you should be released in 20 years' time."
That's incredibly powerful. Basically saying the law sets the minimum at 20, but based on who you are and what you've done before, you shouldn't get out even then.
Exactly. It was a strong moral judgment layered onto the legal sentence, reflecting, I think, the community's horror, not just at this crime, but at the fact he had offended before.
So the conviction and sentence are in place. But that wasn't the end of the legal road, was it? Cowan appealed.
Almost immediately. And the appeal focused squarely on the method that caught him the Mr. Big sting.
Right. His argument was that the confession shouldn't have been allowed in court.
Precisely. His lawyers argued that the confession was inadmissible. They claimed it was obtained unfairly through police deception, psychological manipulation, and potentially even implied threats inherent in the undercover scenario. They argued it wasn't truly voluntary.
That's always the legal tightrope with these kinds of operations, isn't it? How far can police go?
It absolutely is. The admissibility of Mr. Big confessions has been tested in courts around the world. It pushes the boundaries of acceptable police practice versus the need to solve horrific crimes.
So what did the Queensland Court of Appeal decide?
They heard the arguments, and in May 2015, they delivered their decision. They dismissed Cowan's appeal.
So they upheld the conviction.
They did. It was a significant ruling, essentially validating the use of the Mr. Big technique by Queensland police in this specific context. The court basically found that, while deceptive, the methods used didn't cross the line into being so improper as to render the confession unreliable or inadmissible. The public interest in solving Daniel's murder, combined with the detailed and verifiable nature of the confession itself, weighed in favor of allowing it as evidence.
Okay. So Cowan's appeal failed. But wasn't there also an appeal from the other side, trying to increase the sentence?
Yes, that happened too. The Queensland Attorney General at the time also lodged an appeal. They weren't challenging the conviction, obviously, but they argued that the 20-year non-parole period was inadequate, given the horrific nature of the crime and Cowan's history. They wanted it increased.
Reflecting that public sentiment and Justice Atkinson's comments, really.
Exactly. There was a strong feeling that 20 years wasn't enough. However, the Court of Appeal dismissed that appeal as well.
So the original sentence stood.
The original sentence stood. The conviction was confirmed, but the 20-year minimum non-parole period remained unchanged. That decision, also in May 2015, effectively marked the end of the legal challenges in the case, more than 11 years after Daniel first disappeared.
So the courts finally provided that legal closure. But when you think about the Daniel Morcombe case today, the impact goes so much further than the trial, doesn't it? It really rests on what his parents, Bruce and Denise, did next.
Absolutely. It's quite extraordinary. Almost immediately after Daniel disappeared, even during those agonizing years of searching, they made a conscious decision. They decided not to let their personal tragedy just be a tragedy. They chose to turn it into something proactive, something aimed at preventing this from happening to other families.
And that led to the Daniel Morcombe Foundation.
That's right. They poured their energy, their grief, their resources into creating it. The foundation has had two very clear, intertwined goals from the beginning. First, educating children all across Australia about personal safety, recognizing risks, knowing what to do.
Empowering kids themselves.
Exactly. And second, relentlessly raising public awareness about the dangers posed by predatory criminals, trying to make communities safer by making everyone more vigilant. They essentially turned their devastating personal loss into a national child safety advocacy organization.
And it's not just a name or a website, is it? The foundation is very visible, very active, particularly with its annual events.
Very much so. These events have become fixtures, really. They keep Daniel's memory alive, but always with that focus on safety. The big one is the Day for Daniel.
Usually in October, right?
Yeah, often coinciding with the anniversary period of his disappearance. It's a day focused on child safety education in schools, communities wearing red, Daniel's favorite color, just promoting awareness about keeping kids safe.
And the other major event is the Ride for Daniel.
Yes, the Ride for Daniel. That started remarkably early, back in 2005, only 2 years after he disappeared. It's a big community bike ride, about 50 kilometers across the Sunshine Coast. It's this incredible, visible demonstration of community support and ongoing commitment to the cause, year after year.
Through all this work, and through their own horrific experience, the Morcombes effectively became, well, experts, didn't they? Experts on navigating the nightmare of a missing child investigation.
They really did.
Yeah.
And they've shared that hard-won knowledge. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Bruce Morcombe gave some really specific, practical advice to the family of another high-profile missing child in Australia, William Terrell.
What kind of advice?
It was incredibly insightful about the sheer chaos investigators face. He warned the Terrell family specifically about being overwhelmed by what he called bizarre and offbeat information.
Meaning?
Meaning tips from psychics, well-intentioned but ultimately useless sightings, conspiracy theories, all the noise that floods into a major case.
Yeah.
He talked about receiving hundreds of leads about, specific sheds or water tanks where Daniel might be hidden.
And the police have to check them all out.
They have to. Bruce stressed that point. Even though 99% of it is useless, investigators have to dedicate huge resources to checking every single one, just on the tiny chance that one seemingly crazy tip might actually contain a disguised confession or a kernel of truth hidden inside. It's a massive drain on resources.
So what did he say was helpful? Where should the focus be?
His advice was really about prioritizing verifiable data over speculation. He emphasized the importance of things like CCTV footage, ATM camera records, phone data, things that can objectively place people or disprove alibis. He said that kind of hard data is far more valuable to investigators than 1,000 anonymous, unverifiable tips. You can see they learned exactly how these investigations work and where the real breakthroughs are most likely to come from.
It's incredible insight born from the worst possible experience. Now, given the national profile of the case, it was inevitable it would be documented in media, right? True crime shows and podcasts.
Oh, yes. It was covered extensively. Shows like Crime Investigation Australia, podcasts like Case File True Crime Podcast did deep dives into the investigation. That's fairly standard for major cases.
But then it moved beyond factual documentation into fictionalization, didn't it? And that's where things got controversial.
Exactly. That's a much trickier area. There was talk of a film specifically titled Where is Daniel? But the main controversy erupted around a 2022 film called The Stranger.
What was that one about?
The Stranger wasn't directly about Daniel's abduction, but it fictionalized the complex undercover police operation, the Mr. Big sting, that led to Cowan's arrest and confession. It starred Joel Edgerton and Sean Harris.
Okay, so based on the investigation, but fictionalized, how did the Morcombes react to that?
They reacted very strongly and very publicly. They stated they were upset by the film and, quote, demanded that the filmmakers stop using Daniel's name and his tragedy to promote or market the movie.
Wow, so they felt it was exploiting their son's memory for entertainment.
That was clearly their feeling. It really highlighted this deep ethical tension in the true crime genre. You have the filmmakers, perhaps, wanting to explore the police work, the psychology of the sting. But you have the victim's family saying, this is not entertainment. This is our life, our trauma. You don't have the right to repackage it and sell it, especially without our consent or involvement.
It's a powerful stance. They'd spent years building this legacy focused on safety and respect, and they drew a very firm line when they felt that was being crossed by commercial filmmaking.
Absolutely. Their advocacy wasn't just about preventing future crimes. It became about demanding respect for victims and their families in how these stories are told and consumed in the public domain. Yeah. Hashtag outro.
So looking back over this deep dive, we've traced the story from that awful, brief moment under the Keel Mountain Road overpass through 8 long years of searching.
Years defined by incredible police persistence, massive community involvement, and ultimately, that controversial but effective Mr. Big operation that secured the confession.
And we saw the forensic work finally bring Daniel home, the DNA match from something as simple as a toothbrush providing that final certainty.
Yeah, and the legal battles that followed, confirming the conviction, but also highlighting those complex issues around undercover tactics and sentencing.
But perhaps the most enduring element is the legacy built by Bruce and Denise Morcombe, how they took unimaginable grief and channeled it into the Daniel Morcombe Foundation, creating a national force for child safety education and awareness.
Their work really has shifted the conversation, hasn't it? From just reacting to tragedy to proactively trying to equip kids and communities to prevent it. They turn their worst nightmare into tangible, positive action.
It really underscores the power of awareness, of education, of taking those hard lessons learned and putting them into practice.
Which does raise a really important question, I think, for you, the listener, to mull over. We've talked about the incredible resources poured into solving this one case. 8 years of police work, millions in rewards, complex stings, lengthy trials and appeals. Given all that, how can we as a society get better at integrating the practical, hard-won lessons from the Morcombe Foundation into our everyday preventative measures.
Yeah, how do we strike that balance between needing those intensive police resources for when things go wrong and investing effectively in the community-led awareness and education that the Foundation champions to try and stop them going wrong in the first place? How do we ensure Daniel's story continues to genuinely safeguard future generations?
Some to think about.
Definitely. Well, thank you for joining us on this very deep dive into a case that profoundly impacted Australia.